Hey guys, it's Boba. As a lot of you know, I've been reading the FNAF series, for better or worse. And frankly, I think it's about time that we have a review on it and share my thoughts, because honestly, it's probably not gonna be what you expect. Before that though, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. It not only helps out my channel since I'm trying to get 100 subs, but it helps motivate me to continue making this content. With that, let's just begin. The FNAF book series has always been a point of some heartburn within the FNAF community. Many people don't know if they should read the books or if they shouldn't, what's going on in the games and how they relate to the books and vice versa. So I'm going to review the 3 series. I'm going to go over the good, the bad, the specific books I'd recommend, and an age rating for each series, because some of them are very different. So here are the 3 major series. We have the original 3 books, the Fazbear Fright books, and the Tales of the Pizzaplex. So let's just talk about the original 3 first. I mean, they were the first out, and this is going to give us a baseline for what we're going to talk about in the future. This is the only series of books that has a consistent, overarching plot through all of it. I'm going to give you a short synopsis. This is a review. If you don't want spoilers, I don't know why you're on here, but just skip a couple seconds ahead and you'll be fine. The overall story is that Charlie, who is our main person we're following throughout these books, finds out about the mystery of the old Fazbear Pizzeria and why all the animatronics were acting super weird. It was because they were housing the spirits of children that had perished at the hands of William Afton. Not surprising, this is the story beat for the games. It's just way more focused on, and instead of it being in paper clippings, we actually have it as a story. Now, William Afton is guarding this place. He's just a night guard for an old dilapidated building. As the story progresses, William dies in the Springtrap suit, but manages to survive in the most mad scientist sort of way ever. He also ends up revealing that Charlie is a robot and is actually one of the many versions of the original Charlie who was murdered years prior. Because apparently, Charlie is the daughter of Henry. Look, it does not connect perfectly with the games. I don't think it's supposed to connect one-to-one. But this is the story that we were given in the first 3 books. Now, based on everything I've said, this isn't going to be a hot take. But this series of books, in my opinion, is not very good. After reading them, I was super bored. Charlie is just not interesting. Her friends aren't interesting. Afton is just super weird. He's almost like a cartoon villain with how over the top he is. And based on the world that was built, none of them really fit well. Now, Afton has always been a character in the shadows, but he is just way too much in the forefront, like a really odd fanfiction I could find online. But I can tell you for a fact, I can find better fanfiction online than these 3 books. Now, let's talk about positives. When it comes to the good parts of the series, I'd have to say that the short section with Funtime Freddy in the last book is probably the most interesting. I also really liked Mangle. Honestly, I wish there was more of them. Funtime Freddy and Mangle are just so much more interesting and menacing than Springtrap. They actually had me on the edge of my seat because they were actual threats. Springtrap was never really scary to me, which is bad because this is supposed to be a horror series. So overall, I think you can guess, but that's about all the positives I have for this. Which isn't saying much because all the positives are like 3 pages out of a total of 3 books. Personally, I'd say just get the graphic novels for these 3. They did a far better job with the story, and I could just skip the parts I didn't care about. Because let's face it, I already thought the characters were boring. I just skipped to the parts where the animatronics are because frankly that's all I care about. For age range, I'd really say 10 and up. I'd feel comfortable with that just because it's not scary in my opinion. It's more goofy in some parts than anything else, but that's because just Springtrap is so over the top. For Fazbear Frights, I'm gonna just be really honest. I didn't read much of it. My books were just very selective because, frankly, I was so disappointed with the first series, I just figured this series was going to be awful too. I was pleasantly surprised though. There are certain chapters that were much better than I expected. Personally, chapters like Count the Ways and What We Found were just great for me. These chapters captured the psychological horror I adore in a series like this. FNAF has never been a graphic series, so the abrupt endings and the mental fear is really just hitting that sweet spot for me. I would say that once again the series is a hit and miss, but when it hits, it checks all of my boxes. It is really good. Personally, I'd say buy the books that tickle your fancy. Do a little research. Look at their chapter and find just ones that sound interesting. And then don't buy the ones that don't. Overall, you're going to be a lot happier than if you bought all of them. Another thing about this series is I would say this is definitely a friendly teen series. It's not overly intense, but it's just good enough to be in that horror genre. If you're specifically looking for lore, I would say pick up Fazbear Frights the Cliffs and read the chapter He Told Me Everything and Fazbear Frights Gumdrop Angel What We Found. They're very interesting in the dynamic in which characters are acting and how things just relate to one another. I'd say the age range for this specific series is probably 14 plus. It's a little more intense with the horror, and younger kids may not necessarily handle that well. So next we're going to talk about Tales of the Pizzaplex, and, well, there is a lot going on that I wasn't expecting. Once again, the series is a very hit and miss with their chapters, but to my surprise, every book was well worth the money. However, I do have to say that while the stories about Mimic, the Storyteller, and Gregory are great, some of the chapters are a whole new level of intense. Look, the stories are really, really good. They are very well written. I really enjoyed reading them, but I had to put the books down many times from just how graphic it could be. To me, the violence was very extreme compared to the last two series. However, let me just put this into perspective. In all the books that are out so far in this series, by the way, there are more coming out, 15 people have died in the most horrific ways possible. They've been ripped apart, smashed, shoved into fridges after being folded, and some were shredded. And on top of that, it goes into some intense detail, like heads are rolling on floors, you can see the spines, they're pulling out esophaguses. I'm like, wow, this is intense. Now, I will say I'm an easily queasy person. I don't do well with gore, but this went from a psychological horror to being really descriptive violence. This went from family friendly to being way not family friendly. From the beginning, FNAF death has always been implied, never horrifically stated and explained. I guess you could say Sister Location was probably the closest we had to graphic, but then again, it's just a blood splatter on the screen. You don't actually see anyone die. It's not described. This is not a family-friendly series. This is a young adult series, not a preteen series. I know that on the back of these books it says 12 and up, but no way. That is not what I would say. Like, I would say a minimum of 16, but any younger, and poor kids are gonna have these really awful descriptive nightmares. So ultimately, please don't let younger kids read these chapters. Now, not all of the chapters are that intense, but if you want the lore for the games and ultimately to understand what's going on in Security Breach, you've got to read them. It's just mandatory. You won't appreciate the game if you don't. Ultimately, this is your discretion, though. The decision is yours. If you want to read them, read them. If you don't. But I know for me, I'm gonna keep reading them. I really do enjoy how they're written. I wish it wasn't so graphic, but you know what? That's gonna be my trade-off because the other series have not been super awesome. This one is really good. I'd really like to hear your thoughts if you've actually read the books. I mean, there's a lot to speculate and just talk about in general. So if you do have some comments, I'd love to read them below. I think we could have a really good conversation. Especially if you want to ask me questions about the books. I've spent way too much time reading this. I've spent way too much money reading this. Honestly, if you have questions, it'd be good because at least then I can use the books to some benefit. Because frankly, I should have just bought the 2 books in the Fazbear Fright series that I like and just bought the Tales of the Pizzaplex. Otherwise, I don't care about the rest of the books. They're not that interesting. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a great time. Bye!